I'm going to pivot a little bit at
Please.
conversation. We've talked a lot about the the earthly components of gun violence, but you bring a sci-fi out of this world component to the artwork that I think people would really appreciate an explanation for.
So the sandworm is a character from the novel and the film Dune. And it's a character that produces the spice, which is the most essential and valuable commodity in the universe in that world of Dune. And to me, being an American, being Iranian American, but being, you know, raised in America, born and raised in America, the most valuable commodity in our universe of America is capital and violence. Not to bring it back to that, I'm like, here you go. But
Weird.
and so that's why I was thinking the sandworm, because I thought it was a really interesting analogy. It's also horrific. It's also very ugly, and it also is interesting because I think there's some imagery in here that's sort of embedded in my practice, again, as an Iranian American, with, you see the Persian miniature clouds potentially up above. In the piles of kind of dead bodies, there are Persian miniature figures, there's Goya, there's actually figures from all different paintings and transnationally represented Spanish painters, Persian painters, images from there's some photographic images as well, thinking about this issue of this kind of militarism and violence as a transnational issue. And the landscape, to me, is one that we see in sort of the wars of the Middle East, where it's like a desert landscape with America kind of going, colonizing, quote unquote, protecting, or whatever the narrative is, but actually creating this incredible havoc in whatever country that is. And so that is kind of where that sandworm analogy is. They're kind of emerging as this covert military force that is just like taking the civilians down. But yeah, it's specifically because of the spice analogy relates to the ties between policy, gun violence, and capital. But yeah, that's sort of the deal. And I mean, honestly, in a lot of my work, I involve like imagery from Persian miniature painting, because there's a beautiful way that worlds have been built for, thousands of years in Persian miniature painting, that narratives have unfolded, narratives around kings, the Shahnameh, just 1001 Arabian Nights, just thinking about the ways that historical tales are told, I think, to me, has always been very inspirational to thinking about how do we tell modern tales, also using flat perspective, also using this kind of one frame character development and narrative development that I invoke in my collages, but that are invoked also in Persian miniature painting. So there's an analogy there for me as well about storytelling, mythology.
I also think it sort of touches upon the growing xenophobia within the United States. I know you started to mention it.
Yeah.
This fear of outsiders kind of threatening American democracy. Again, another reason, why the Second Amendment was started, sort of fed this internal violence that we've been experiencing for a very long time, but is also starting to come to a boiling point. To use like this sci-fi, otherworldly, ugly commodity as a metaphor for this outside xenophobia and the embrace of violence as a rightful culture and a rightful response to it it's a bit scary,
Yeah.
But
Totally, I agree with that, and that's also definitely part of it as well. Yeah, the xenophobia is really, it's interesting because we're in a moment where there's a lot of domestic focus right now, as it should be. At the same time, there's a lot of transnational struggle going on that's in tandem and parallel with what's happening in America. We see it in Palestine, we see it in Iran, as well. And and I was talking about this with a friend earlier. There's so many struggles going on right now in our country that it's sort of like you can't even keep on top of it. Like we still have the Muslim bear. You know what I mean? But it's like now that's down here because there's so many other things kind of layered on top. So it's wild. But I mean, I feel like, art making is, for me, there's like this positive energy and hope for folks that do involve social justice practices or sort of like political thematics in the work. Like there's a real potentiality there, I think, for change. And so even though that image and that narrative that we're just talking about is pretty dark and pretty like heavy, there's a lot of light and positivity that comes from the art making and the dialogue that ensues. So it's sort of like both sides of those coins, I think, or that coin is really important.
Go back to your issue of there's so many issues being piled on top of us right now. A lot of people can feel a bit lost, especially with the issue of gun violence. It's been so pervasive for such a long time. Um, you know, that's why I'm very curious to hear your opinion, because you've dived a little bit more headfirst into politics than a lot of people have, and you're certainly an active protester and are activist in that sense as well. Do you have advice for people who are involved in politics and policy change?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were talking a little bit about this. I think that there's so many ways to get involved right now, actually. And it's really beautiful because, like I said, we are just having this moment where you could hold a Zoom meeting with some friends and just say, we want to talk about pooling our skills to see how we can help this campaign. For example, whatever it is, prison abolition, defunding the police, demilitarizing, whatever it is. And you can have that meeting, you can make some decisions in that meeting, and you can have an event that 1,000 people will go to, because that's how invested people are in participation right now, and in civic participation. And so I think it's really about doing some kind of deep listening, some radical listening, and looking and kind of seeing what resonates with you and what feels potent for you. And then from there, starting the investigation, starting the research, and building alliances, and really, honestly, social media, as much as I have a love-hate relationship with it, has been really, useful for a lot of folks in seeing where they can kind of tap in or where they can find alliances and information. And so I think through like Instagram, Twitter, and all that, it's like, okay, these are some things that are happening. And then from there, seeing who organized that. And then from there, kind of getting involved with literally reaching out to people and saying like, oh, I have these skills. Like, what do you need? What can I do? And then having that conversation. And then if that seems too like overwhelming for folks, also just literally like posting, being active, speaking up, and even having conversations with family members right now. You know what I mean? I think it's like as hyper localized as that. It's all really important work. And I think, we are at a point where I'm thinking about it in this way. A lot of this is not only important work to do, but as artists, it's important research. on how do we organize, how do we tap in, where do we tap in, and thinking about that as a way of making and as a way of participating moving forward. So even if you didn't make anything, quote unquote, product output in the last 4 months, you were observing, you were listening, you were participating in the ways that you could through, signing petitions, posting that out there, being at home, making calls, having like hard conversations that made you uncomfortable. And then all of that work will manifest in something in your practice in the future. You know what I mean? And just having faith that that's how we tap in, is just staying active, staying aware, listening, looking, and then maybe making isn't the moment right now, and that's okay, and that it will come, but yeah, that would be my advice, because there's so many different organizations. Like I could say like, oh, Democratic Socialist, oh, like there's so many that you could participate in. And I think that's important for folks that are interested, but I think it's also about just going easy on yourself and just making sure that you're there and radically listening. And if you're not Black or a POC, that you're able to, allyship is like a contested phrase, but that you're able to see the struggle and step up and stand up when you're needed, in whatever ways, even if that's a conversation with your racist uncle, yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know, I'm ranting.
No, I believe that there is no such thing as a useless gesture. Even small ones are very powerful and needed, and probably a little bit more influential in the long term, because it's those small moments that have contributed to these larger issues. That's why I like to work in subtlety in my own work.
Yeah.
Being a radical cross stitch on your wall that you made, or it's throwing out this culture of you can't talk politics over Thanksgiving, because now we don't know how to talk about our differences anymore. And so maybe we should engage with our uncle or aunt.
Exactly. No, you should. I think now is the time to be uncomfortable. Like if nothing else, that's the way to engage. Like that's what to do, is to make yourself vulnerable and get uncomfortable and have the harder conversations that you've been avoiding for years, and make the harder work that maybe you haven't felt compelled or empowered to do, and just explore that, get a little deeper, I think it's really hard, but I think now's the time to do that. Yeah.
I think even the smallest gestures are radical acts, and people shouldn't underestimate their influence in them, and just to keep on doing them. But thank you so much for joining me and for being part of the show. It was wonderful talking to you and hearing more about your practice, your ideas, and your artwork. Such an important element to bring to the show is the political side to it. Where can people find out more about you?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to thank you, and I want to thank Celine, and for doing this hard work of making the show happen in the middle of a pandemic, which has been insane. So I super, super appreciate you. It's amazing. It looks beautiful, so it's awesome. And you are amazing. So anyway, tinyscissors.com, Tiny Scissors on Instagram. Yeah, those are the best places to look. And I'm very open to conversation and dialogue. So I always encourage people to get in touch with me if they want more info, or even if they want to know how to tap in or literally go to some direct actions. I'm going all the time. So yeah, DM me, baby.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and stay safe and stay healthy, please.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.